Record. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Student Built Startups podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Stone. This is episode 49. Today, I'm going to be talking to the guest. We're going to do this afterwards. Shama. I'll have you start off by saying hello to everyone listening and sharing one crazy but true fact about yourself.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Shema Yahya. And I guess one crazy fact about me is that I was once a model. How about that?
Whoa.
A model.
What kind of model was that?
Like, runway,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. How did you like that?
I mean, it was nice. I mean, I got paid pretty decent for like putting on one outfit. And I got all the nice pictures and stuff like that.
That sounds like it'd be a kind of a cool gig to do for a while. You get some probably really good photos that you can hang on for a while, and like
Exactly.
it's got to be a good, interesting experience.
And
So
everybody wants to wear the outfit you're wearing, but don't ever wear it. Most of your friends, you have like bragging rights. So
yeah,
yeah.
well, that's very cool. I guess we can kind of start off by giving everybody kind of a brief overview of like who you are. So maybe just share a little bit about your background, such as like where you're from, your education, and kind of where your entrepreneurial ambitions started.
Sweet, sweet. Thank you. So I was born and raised in Kigali, Rwanda, which is in East Africa. I spent most of my life there, high school, all that stuff. I actually came to the US, I believe it was 2019 in August. I came to University of Nebraska Lincoln and majoring in integrated science with a focus in ag communication and environmental science. So that's what I've been doing for the past 2 years. And a little bit about my background, back home in Rwanda was I was the kid who was mostly into sports. So I always had a little of a competitive edge. I played basketball and I just loved winning and the process, how to get better, all that type of stuff. But when I graduated from high school, I actually took a gap year. And in that gap year, I just was doing a lot of researching of things that I find interesting aside from sports. Um, and I started going into NGOs and I started helping out with a lot of um, initiatives to help children develop kind of like leadership thinking and entrepreneurship thinking. And I that's when I started to dive into holding onto projects and starting to create them and stuff like that. And so from there, I think it's when I realized that I had a thing for like connecting people and helping societies and being more of a social entrepreneur. And so I came to the US with that idea of just loving to connect people. And so when I got the chance to play a bunch of board games, because back home I didn't play a bunch of board games, I just kind of fell in love with the ability to how to connect people and the ability to create communities through games. And so that's kind of how I got into, I guess, what we're going to talk about today, but that's a little of a short.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can kind of see the common connections there because you're talking about you're very into sports and like that's like a competitive thing. And then entrepreneurship has a lot of similarities to sports. And
Yeah.
then board games are also kind of a competitive thing, depending on who you're playing with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really excited to hear about this board game. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Is it Muko? Is that how you say it, or is it Mucko?
It's mucho.
Mucho. Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, how about share a little bit about Mucho, kind of what you've been doing to get it started and creating it, and then also like what's the basis of it and what plans you have.
Sweet. Thank you. So yeah, like I said, this all started, maybe I can go back from the beginning where it all started. I was just visiting at the time, people, my host family, people, visiting them and we had like dinner and, just kind of hanging out. Obviously, we all didn't know each other that well, so it was kind of awkward. And, the kids are just quiet and shy. And then you just kind of feel like, it's a very weird situation. And then they bring out all these games. And just to give a bit more context, like I said, back home, it's more of just like the basketball, football, like those really active sports is what you people engage in their free time, as opposed to like board games. Um, so when I saw that, and we played like one game, which is my favorite game, it's called Exploding Kittens.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, we played that game and I was like, what? This is insane. And then, everybody was friends and, we're all laughing and stuff like that. And then um, at that time, I think like 2 months prior to that, due to my major and what I study, I was looking into how can we talk about the environment and wildlife protection in a way that people can actually, support it. And also because I'd worked in NGOs, I knew that it was hard to really get people to care about such stuff. And
Mhm.
so when I saw the opportunity to make a game, I just connected everything I study with my experience. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a game based off gorillas because back home, we really care about conserving our gorillas. I'm going to make a game about gorillas and everyone is going to play it and they're going to try to protect gorillas in this game. And if the game is good enough, we'll get enough traffic on our websites and we can connect with NGOs and we can be able to save some wildlife while doing it.
Sounds like
Um,
you oh, go ahead. Sounds like you put a lot of thought into it. I mean, like kind of cross breeding these different areas that you have interest and expertise and kind of social goodwill. I think it's a really, really innovative, cool idea.
yeah,
Sorry to cut you off there.
it's fine. Yeah, so that's really how it started. And the fun thing was, like I said, I was in this phase of just really trying to figure myself out in terms of what I want to do because I had figured out at the time that I enjoy telling stories. And at the time, I was really looking into like animation and, all these different platforms, but all of them were just like so hard for me to get in like and do something really quick because like I said, I had this spirit of getting things done, being competitive, having something finished, looking at it just made me feel happy. And so I tricked myself. I was like, I think if I make a game to probably be very fast. So that was like what I think a year ago. So that's just the background of the whole project. And so essentially what happened is the Mucho game, um, uh, I got two of my friends who are code game designers on it. I told them, hey, I have this idea. This is how it works. I think it's going to work. Let's just sit down and do something. And so essentially we created this game where basically everyone is given what we call a Mucho family. This is kind of like assets or tokens and in this mucho family, you have what we call the real muchos and the fake muchos. And essentially using playing cards, which are given to players, everyone is trying to grow their family before everyone else. So you're trying to like protect your assets and like grow them as well, or like get more, if you will. And there's obviously like a certain number you need to reach to win the game. And so it's really like a very competitive environment where you're trying to like grow and protect. And there's a lot of like plot twists and stuff like that. So that's just how the game works and operates at a really short summary I can give, if you will. And what we're trying to do with it essentially, obviously, we're planning to release the game in August. We're gonna release the game on the Game Crafter. Um, but really our long-term vision is that it can be a game that can be able to create traffic and raise discussions that are really important about wildlife and how we go about protecting our environment and stuff like that. So hopefully we can be able to create these platforms for conversations between our um, customers and just other people generally through games.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a really, really good kind of reasoning behind it. And I'm a huge fan of board games. Like I've always enjoyed like card games and board games and that kind of stuff. And like the other weekend I was playing a board game with some of my family members. I'm like, it's crazy how just a deck of cards can like turn a gathering of people into like people laughing and having a good time and that kind of stuff. And it sounds like this game you're making is actually going to be pretty fun and interesting. And I want to hear more. Like once it's released, I want you to make sure to reach out to me because I definitely want to look at it. And I mean, depending on how it looks, I might actually buy it there. I mean, it sounds pretty fun.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah, like you said, that was a driving force, the ability to connect people, and so that's really how the whole game was made, and that's why it took long to make the game because most games don't take so long to make.
Hmm.
But It was like, how do we create something that is innovative, but still has the goal to connect people. So sometimes the cards were just like, you know what, this card is not really connecting anyone. It's really pointless. We're moving that card. And we're like, oh, we need some more interaction. How do we make the game mechanics work to do that? And so we really cared about making sure that this game is something that um, people can sit down and maybe, 3 weeks down the line can be like, remember no playing much when you did this to me? And that's really what we wanted. And so it was really, we took a really a serious approach on every single detail about it. And on top of that, this was, we wanted to make it a very culturally, um, if you will, how do I say, it, very oriented in terms of like sharing some different elements of the culture. And so what is on each card, for instance, there's like a word in English and there's a word in Kinyarwanda, which is the mother tongue in Rwanda. So that's like, I think there's no other card that does that. There's usually just like one name on a card. But for instance, like skip in English, there's a word for skip in Kinyarwanda, and you kind of put it on the sides. So whenever you're playing the game, you can say whatever you want and it still makes sense.
That's
um,
cool.
so all those little things made the game really take so long. And as workers with students, we can't really work on this 24/7, even if we wanted to. So yeah.
The more I think about it, like, it intrigues me because I almost feel like having that kind of cross cultural aspect will be a really positive like driving force, because I think that like people like kind of experiencing some new culture, and even if it's just words from a different language on a card. I think that's an interesting aspect that you included in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to stray just a little bit from what we had planned, but I'm curious at like when you're developing a game, like what, like, I know you have like an idea and you start with that. But like when you're actually like making like the game and the rules, like where do you start with all that stuff that goes into it?
Yeah. So the rule of thumb is that you just kind of have to go play a bunch of games and be inspired. That is the number one rule.
Okay.
So we went on like a spring and just played a bunch of games that we didn't even probably like, but we just tried them out.
Hmm.
And we were just kind of trying to see what works for us, what makes us excited to play games. And then from there, that would be like our fuel for inspiration and ideation. So there's always that element. And so for me, the games that I really played that I liked a lot, I talked about Exploding Kittens. There's another game called Avalon. They had a way of taking the excitement away from the game and put it on the people. So
Mm.
now it's no longer the game that is exciting. It's seeing people's reactions and people's, all of a sudden becoming these crazy characters because the game requires you to be this person to win. And so we figured out that while we don't know what every card will look like, we know what we want the people to be like in the game. And so that's how we developed the game, kind of with that mindset. So whenever we tested the game and there was more focus on the cards and the players, we just said we're doing something wrong. And then we'll just kind of go back and change a few cards, not everything, of course. The goal was still the same. It was always about a gorilla family and protecting it. But how that changes over the course of the time was was very interesting. Um, so
Yeah.
it's starting with what you want out of the game, and then you can create from there. Yeah.
Oh, that actually connected a lot of dots for me. Like it makes a lot more sense now, because so that game that I played a couple weeks ago was it was Exploding Kittens, and it makes sense. Like that game, like the focus is on the people. Like if you were just focused on the cards, it would be kind of boring. I mean, not, but I mean,
Yeah.
it has elements to it that bring the excitement out of the cards. But also, like today, I learned how to play Yu-Gi-Oh cards for the first time, and that
Wow.
was like a very analytical, like
Yeah.
uh, not much like
Yeah. Yep.
it was all in the cards, and it's a very different experience. So I
Yep.
really understand kind of what you were saying there.
Yep.
Um, so how many people like are working on this game development process with you?
So we were four, if you
Okay.
count me, and then there's other two co-game designers who worked on that, and then there's another illustrator. So I do the game design and illustration, and he also helps illustration. he has made a really beautiful box design and some other ending elements. And also we work together in like making videos, like how to play video. So we get to share both of our skills between me and the other game, no, sorry, yeah, illustrator. He's called Venimana Atali. And then the core game designers, one is called Samuel Ranjira, and the other is called Matthew Sankar. So we worked on it on different phases. I worked on it the whole project, but they worked on it in different parts. So that's how we kind of work together.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. So what have you kind of learned from like, yeah, we're gonna kind of switch over to like more of like entrepreneurial type talk
Mhm.
now, but like what have you kind of learned from this process as far as like kind of leading and kind of being like a center point of a project development?
There's so much that you never know until you enter into any project. You think you know a lot until you step into it. And then you kind of realize that, you're like, you had no idea what you're doing. So I think for me, I mean, starting from the day one, I obviously knew that I didn't know what I was doing because I was just beginning to learn how to illustrate. I had never played much games in my whole life. This is what my first business, if you will. So there was a lot of learning to do. So I think the question was what I've learned, right, during that
Yeah,
process.
yeah. Like what have you learned that's like important when you're trying to lead a project development process or that sort of
Yeah.
thing?
So I think one of the main things is that as a leader, you need to give yourself time to grow. Like you need to schedule um, be a day or maybe a few hours to kind of pick up some skills. Because if you're not growing, your team will not grow. And so I think when you're starting a business, there's always a lot of demand on you, obviously. There's a high demand on you. But I think in reality, if you're able to just kind of spare some time and figure out, okay, I need to learn this because if I don't, my team has nothing. So that's always one of the most important things. And the second thing for me was because this was a very creative industry based business, the ability to set expectations, but also stay optimistic in a sense. Like um, we had all these goals, like we need to do this by then, publish by then, get to the market, do some marketing by then. That is really good. It's nice to be optimistic and have some goals, but sometimes you don't really meet that. And you need to be able to communicate to the team when such doesn't happen. So you need to be a good communicator. You need to really not be so emotionally attached to everything because expectations sometimes are not always, it doesn't always work out the way you think it will. And that in many ways in a creative business, that's what will happen. So as you walk into the business, you need to be optimistic, but don't be discouraged if you don't meet certain deadlines. And I think some of the people I really read the books for really like who run like Disney and other big creative industries. They always talk about they don't let the pressure of deadlines force them to push their creative people to do something that's horrible. And I agree with that. Like in the early phases, you're under pressure of trying to finish things as quickly as you can, but you cannot lose the big picture, which is obviously creating something that is of value and that is of quality. So yeah, being able to be a good communicator, not losing the sight of the big picture. Those are things that you need to always remember in the early phases more than ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Both of those really resonated with me, but the second one there, really like I really kind of understand what you're talking about because like I think there's a fine line between setting expectations, and like goals and like objectives and like it's like a very like hard to find like where do I go as far as like trying to meet those objectives and deadlines and goals versus like maximizing our like perfectionism, because if you go too far to the perfectionism side, you end up never getting something done. But like if you try to rush everything right away, like it's very likely going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really challenging thing to do, even by yourself, like as an individual. But when you have multiple people working on something, I could only imagine how that adds a whole nother level of complexity to that situation.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely does because everyone has a share in what you're saying, and you feel the need that everyone should be asked what to do or not to do. But especially when you are trying to reach a deadline, you kind of have to be, as a leader, you need to really be honest and have that trust your gut, if you will, and kind of look at it and be like, well, is this really what we want to put out there in the world? And then when you feel like the answer is no, as much as it sucks, you just have to accept it and kind of come back at the table and figure out what's missing. And that's the entrepreneurship process. That's
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Yeah, it is. And it's crazy how entrepreneurship fits itself into so many different areas and categories and industries, I guess, because like a lot of people think of entrepreneurship as like marketing agency. Like that's a lot of people think of entrepreneurship as that, but like you could be an artist and also be like an entrepreneur in a sense.
Oh,
Like
sure.
it's weird how like sometimes things are boxed in like that, but that's why I love interviewing people like you who are doing things outside of the typical quote entrepreneurship stuff, because like board game stuff is super fun, and also it's like super entrepreneurial. There's so many like creative aspects, and then the business planning and marketing, and yeah. So
I agree with you.
I guess one thing I love to ask my guests is like, out of like their business development or product development process, like what is like one of the mistakes that you learned the most from making?
Hmm. Well, I made a lot of mistakes.
We all do.
Yeah, I've really been thinking about that a lot lately. Like somebody asked me that, I don't know, like what do I say? Like what are the biggest mistakes that have come up? And I think for me, when I really think about it deeply, I think it's about really you need to be self-aware of who you are. Because when you step into business, there's some high demanding things will come out of business, and you need to know who you are. Who are you in tough situations? And that is different for everyone. For me, one of the biggest issues I like to solve things really quickly. Like I want to get things out of the way as fast as I can. You know? And now what that means in business is that sometimes I'll not do my research on, maybe I'll not look at the numbers very well before, let's say, I purchase a few card stock for testing cards or whatever. And maybe if I really looked at the numbers better, I would have found a better deal, uh, across the street or something, something like
Yeah.
that. So for me, that was my biggest issue was I sometimes ignored who I was in business because me in business, I have my own weaknesses as a person, and I need to be very aware of that. Because once you go into business, a lot of things, you influence a lot of things. You influence your budget, how you use your budget, um, maybe how you talk to your colleagues. Maybe sometimes, like I said, coming from a sports background, tough love is just all I ever knew. So like sometimes you have to be very loving, and and that's something that I had to train myself and kind of be very, like, hey, keep at it, and be this inspirational guy, as opposed to be like, come on, you can do better. There's a high need, I think, for any business person you need to know who you are. And because once you know who you are, it's like it really helps you to avoid a lot of traps.
Mm.
Um, so that's the first thing for me. That's the first mistake I did. And then I think the second mistake for me that I did was um, trying to do business, trying to run a business, looking at like one aspect of it only. For instance, if I'm creating a product, I can't ignore the funding element. Like some of the times, my strategy was like, let me just do this product. Once it's done, the money will come. That's not always how it works. You have to be able to balance things out. For instance, if you're like a student, as most people listen to this podcast are, what are the funding opportunities around you? You have to always be able to like keep an eye out on the different parts of your business so that when you need the money, for instance, because it's a common error most people do is like they think once I make this product, I'll be able to find the money. But then that puts in a situation where it goes like, okay, now I need the money. Where's the money? It's not there. So you need to plan in ahead and try to just like go to different competitions. If it requires you to take a month preparing, okay, that's a good deal. Just, take some time off and balance out between your product development and your funding search and your marketing plan. So you need to kind of grow the business together. Don't leave one aspect out of it, because by the time you look back and you have not developed all the aspects together, there's like one, like let's say for instance, marketing is like 3 months behind, and and that's a really bad mistake. So you need to be aware of that, and be on top of everything. You have to really understand your business model. And I think for me, it took me a while to understand, my business model. And I think for me, those are the three big mistakes: is knowing who you are, staying on top of everything, and also just understanding your business model very well. So that the reason why I say that is because once you understand your business model, you kind of know what is worth spending much time on, what is worth avoiding, what is worth spending more time on, where should I get more people into the business, those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very well said. There was a lot of really valuable pieces of guidance and information in that short. Uh, I don't want to call it a rant, but rant that you did there. um, and yeah, I mean, I really like agree with you 100% on those. Like self awareness. Like I feel like most people think they know themselves, and then they go and they do something like this where they have to work with a small team and do different stuff, and like it's like you're always learning more about yourself, and um I
Mhm.
it's like you just end up surprising yourself with new things you find out.
Yeah.
um and then one of my favorite quotes about the second one that you said, where you mentioned that you have to kind of grow all businesses at the same rate and balance everything out. One of my favorite things is like a lot of people focus so much on like trying to push the product, and they don't actually work on developing a quality product. So like one of my favorite quotes is that like really good or really like heavy marketing, it either helps you sell your product or it just helps you reveal how bad your product is.
That's true.
So that's like one of my favorite quotes, and I thought that fit well with your little guidance that you gave there.
Yeah.
um, so here's my last question before the fast five. So if there's somebody listening and they want to create a business based on a game, whether that's a board game or a card game or maybe even a video game, what piece of like actionable advice would you give them?
So I think it's understanding what you're selling. And that sounds very simple, but it's not, because a lot of people think that you're selling a game, but what you're selling is an experience. So like just to kind of refer to, you said you played Exploding Kittens like a few weeks ago. The experience there is what you're buying. So you're buying the opportunity to kind of, have this the drama filled kind of atmosphere when you're playing a game. And some people buy games because they like the strategic thinking a bit behind it, like making me think too much, or like making my brain work a little bit more than others and makes me excited, whatever, whatever. That's an experience. And so when you're making a game, you need to understand what's the experience you're trying to create. So once you understand that element, you're able to really be better than most people, because most people are not aware of the experience they're trying to, get out. And also helps you know your market a little bit better. Um, so I'll say just figure that out and take time understanding that, and you'll be good to go. The rest, you can always look at YouTube and other people and learn from them how they develop their games, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I really like that piece of advice. I think that'll help a lot of people that are trying to do a new venture around a game. So now for the fast five. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's not, but we call it the fast five. So what's the most valuable learning experience that you've had in general?
I think I would say teaching children in an NGO. Yeah, I learned a lot about what you can teach people and what you can learn from them, and what it takes to build a community, and also the need for helping out in society. So that was a very good experience for me.
Very cool. Um, what is one book that you would recommend?
It's called The Ride of a Lifetime by Robert Iger. I believe that's how you say his name. So he was the CEO of Disney for 15 years, and he wrote a lot about how he was able to build the business and save it because it was really about to go down. So that's an interesting book. I would recommend anyone in the creative industry, creative entrepreneur, if you will. It's a really good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that one I haven't had recommended before. So that's awesome. I mean, with 50 episodes, you get a lot of repeats. So I love it when there's a new book that hasn't been mentioned before. So yeah. What is one business related tool that you would recommend?
Just one. All right.
I mean, as many as you want to list off, but what's
Uh,
like the most important ones that you think?
I think I would say Instagram. Instagram is definitely up there.
All right.
So Instagram gives an opportunity to market in a new way and get to a lot of people, and so it just depends on how well you can use it. Yeah.
Yes. That's a very good point. Knowing what you can do, knowing what you're good at will help you figure out what works best for you. Um, how do you go about like scheduling your time and planning ahead for things?
Um, so I have this, I don't know if it's a gift, but I'll just call it a gift for now. I'm always thinking of what's the worst that could happen.
Yep.
I always think about that, and then I kind of see what I need to do ahead of time and kind of give myself some room for error. Like I said, a lot of things I do are very creative based, so I always end up failing most times before I succeed. So I give myself enough room to fail, which is a different way most people think about things, but that's just how I view things. And then obviously I use the simple, Outlook to schedule my calendar. And I also like to give myself just a few goals I can do maybe during the day if I can. Maybe I'll have like 3 things to accomplish
Yeah.
in the day. And I also kind of work in like a clock in, clock out system. So for instance, if I'm on my desk, I'll probably time myself and work for 2 hours. After that, I'll just leave and never come back at the office until I have to come back.
Yeah. That I actually kind of like that. That's a really kind of cool concept because sometimes I'll be kind of sitting down here in my office room and I'll be down here and I won't actually be working on stuff and I'll be at my desk like where I normally work on stuff and I'll be down here for like 2.5 hours or whatever and like I really like only worked for 30 minutes, but I feel like if I like push the button and like I'm working now, like it would actually help me stay more focused. That's an
Yeah,
interesting concept.
it really helps, and also kind of gives you room to kind of go refreshen up and kind of come back. Think about it like how like in university you probably have like an hour max, and have to walk out and go to another room or something.
Yeah.
That kind of helps you refresh and wake up again or whatever.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I
yeah.
like that. And the last question of the Fast Five: what is the number one thing that drives your motivation?
So for me, I think I've always believed that to whom much is given, much is expected. However that may look like in anyone's life. There's always someone out there who would probably, I would say, wish to have what you have in a sense. So I think waking up with just being really grateful for what you have is a really good start for motivation. But then now thinking ahead and kind of saying, okay, what can I do with the little time I have in this world? What kind of value can I create? However that may look like for anyone. It can be just maybe impacting maybe your friend or if you have a child, your son or something, but it can also just be impacting someone else through what you put out there in the world. So what really drives me is that opportunity to just really be grateful for what I have and also be able to help someone out of, whatever way that may be. Um,
Very
yeah.
well said. Very well said. I like that. Um, so now, before I ask the last question here, I want to make sure that we give you the opportunity to share where we can find more about your game, Mucho.
Sweet. So the most active social media account to have right now is our Instagram. That is Mucho, so MUCO .game. And then we also have a Facebook account, a Facebook page, which is also Mucho Game. You can find us there. We also have a LinkedIn account, so we have all of that. And if you go to our Instagram, we have like in our bio, we have a link that shows our own personal website if anyone wants to check out our website. But all in all, we're pretty much in all those different areas. And I think the biggest thing is you can find us there and kind of see what we're doing as we look forward to our August 1st published date. So yeah, hope to see you guys on our social medias.
Yeah, if you're listening right now, make sure to go give them a follow on Instagram, mucho.game. I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see your game come into fruition and hopefully get my hands on it. All right, so last question here. Shama, it was great having you on the podcast. And last question, I'll just have you provide one main takeaway that you want everybody that's listening to walk away pondering, thinking about.
Oh, thinking about, that's a tough one.
It is. It's a lot of pressure, but is there one thing that you talked about today that you thought like you want to just kind of emphasize once more before we end?
I think it's just more of like thinking about what drives you. That's
Mm-hmm.
really, I like that question because it's a deep question. I think I'll just advise everyone to think about that deeply, like what really drives you in life. And I hope that everyone can really find it because it will make them it'll make them better people, and they'll be able to impact society
Yeah,
in a bigger way. So I think it's more like a challenge. Think about it deeply, what really drives you, and I hope that you find it.
absolutely. And don't stop thinking about it once you figure it out.
Yep.
Well, this was great. I really enjoyed having you on the podcast.
Hey, man, thank you so much, man.
Of course. And